It seems like the wild card in the results really was based on the variant and based on COVID-19 and Delta and how it affected some of your your therapeutics, your monoclonal antibodies for treatment. And it affected it in different ways. And that's responsible, I think, somewhat for the shortfall.
Yeah, Joe, great to be on. A really strong quarter for the company and our core business. So as you mentioned, we beat revenue expectations for the street, but also for ourselves with an accelerating core business in diabetes, oncology, immunology, the main things we do.
Right.
And that's a good sign that the healthcare economy is recovering, but also that our brands are in good shape. A lot of good pipeline readouts we can touch on as well in the last quarter. I think there was a disconnect on revenue with the COVID antibodies. You know, we got into this at the beginning to try to be helpful, and two things happened in Q2 that probably would have been hard to predict standing here, you know, in January. One was that for some time in the quarter, the U.S. in particular stopped distributing our antibodies because of not the Delta variant, oddly, but we may remember back just a few weeks ago when we were worried about Gamma and the P1 variant from Brazil. Where our antibody does not retain its full efficacy. Actually, the antibodies do retain full efficacy against Delta, but that affected the quarter. Additionally, we wrote down some material we had made going back to first half of 2020, before we knew the dose, before we knew we had a successful vaccine, et cetera, and everyone was telling us, make as much as you can, which we did. But it appears some of that material will expire or won't be consumed. So we're taking the write down in Q2 just to normalize that thing. It's the right thing to do at this point. But the core business is super healthy, and I think these results show that.
The antibody treatments, and I guess there are two that we're talking about. In the prior quarter, a year ago, it was $810 million, and it was $148 million, which is kind of interesting. It went down to that point because of the vaccine, obviously. But so it wasn't Delta, but the other variants. Bamlanivimab, one of them had the U.S. health regulator revoked the loan use of that one for COVID-19 because it didn't work on the Gamma variant, is what you're saying?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And that was always the plan, though, just to be clear, that we would come with a combo, but in the sense of speed and urgency. And again, it's at times moving at a different pace than we're used to. But just last November, when we were approved with bamlanivimab alone, it was the only choice we had, and we made enough to serve the entirety of the U.S., saved thousands of lives. But we always plan to pair that with etesevimab, its combo, which is what's still approved in the U.S. now, and retains its efficacy against Delta.
Did the pandemic affect the sales? Did they dampen the sales of any of your other products, in your view? In other words, a lot of companies, Pfizer, Moderna, it's been a boon. For you, was there a negative effect from the pandemic on other drugs?
Well, I think across the industry, Joe, there was a suppression in doctors' visits during the lockdowns in the toughest parts of the pandemic. And in some settings, like in infused oncology, a pretty significant reduction that we reported in prior quarters. What we're reporting in Q2 is a lot of that came back in a big way. And that's another important health outcome of vaccination, right, is that people can go to their doctor safely and be treated for other chronic conditions. And that shows up in our business with treatment increases in diabetes and oncology, immunology, other chronic diseases people need care for. So that's good news in the quarter. And we also had a number of important drug readouts. And we're very new in cycle with a lot of new medicines in those important diseases that are growing pretty rapidly. Revenue up 23% in the quarter is a big number.